Caviar should be round and hard, and it should burst in your mouth at precisely the right moment.
For Mrs. Grant Staton III, life was a cruise.
Andrew!
Until the night, she went for a swim.
Stop, you idiot! Oh, my hair!
Joanna!
Her mother is in shock.
Only one for breakfast!
Her husband is in mourning.
I love L.A.
Seems a mystery woman was picked up by the Elk Cove garbage scout.
And a local handyman in a lot of trouble.
Your children are totally lacking in parental supervision.
Hey, you don't have to tell me these kids are lucky.
Has just found a way out.
She seems to be suffering from amnesia.
Of course I know my name. It's
Yeah, that's my little cookie cutter.
this missing link person is not my husband.
Well, he seems to like you, and he's a nice guy.
Come to daddy.
Gee, Mom, we're so glad you're back. Hi, Mom.
What is it I normally do? I prepared and handled raw food. I was short and fat.
You walked kind of hunched over, you know?
We did it on the first date.
Couldn't call it a date, really. You just did it right there in the parking lot of the 7-Eleven.
And the short, fat sleaze.
Is this Joanna Staton?
Are you going to bring me my lemon, or do I have to squeeze it from my hat?
Is this Joanna Staton? Goldie Hawn.
I'm Joanna Staton.
Baby doll, what's for dinner?
Kurt Russell.
What? No boom boom?
Sugar lips.
Yeah.
Overboard.
Thank you for making me a wife and a mother. And
Why did you do that?
Welcome back to a brand new episode of ReconCineMation. I'm your host, John Diner.
I'm David Munchak.
I'm Brent Hutchins.
And this is the podcast that takes a look back at some of our favorite films from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I feel like I say it a lot, but it's always true. We have a huge and very special episode here because with the great Kurt Russell's birthday on the horizon, we needed to we've been taking a look at most of his films chronologically, and we've got a big one up here today. And in order to honor what should be a national holiday, we needed to bring in the Arturo to our Katerina. See if you can figure out what movie we're covering with one of our very favorite guest co-hosts, EK Wimmer. Welcome back to the show.
EK.
Hey guys. Hey.
Woo.
Thanks for having me back. If I hear Kurt Russell, I woke up from a dead sleep. I just stood up in my bed and my wife said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I said, "Somebody said Kurt Russell." And I think it was ReconCineMation. And then I woke up to a text and you said, "We're going to talk more Kurt Russell." And I said, "I had a premonition. I knew this was coming."
Yeah, it was destiny.
It was destiny.
Destiny.
You're a seer.
It's like a psychological bat signal, but it's a Kurt signal.
You just
just
said
his hair.
It's just his hair. Yeah, exactly. That's perfect.
And I put on my cape and answer the call.
His hair is in full force in this movie too. It is
perfect.
Wow.
Maybe it's tallest.
It's pretty brilliant.
Well, last year, EK, you joined us when we looked back at Big Trouble in Little China, which was in his 1986 release. Now we're going to look at his 1987 release with Overboard.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. One of my all-time favorite movie posters.
Anna Faris, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Anna Faris one. Yeah. Kurt's just got a cameo.
Crap, guys. I watched the wrong one.
Do we even need to talk about that? My God.
I mean, they made it. It was made. I watched it. I don't remember it, though. I think as soon as I watched it, I forgot about it.
Wasn't it called
Exactly.
Overboard Havana Nights or something like that? Havana Nights, or is that?
I think that's Dirty Dancing, right?
Yeah, I think you're
Okay.
mixing them up.
We're pretty
But
close. Similar.
You could do a crossover. That could be the third one. So
Yeah.
Apparently.
let's not even discuss that new one. But let's solely talk about the greatness that is the original Overboard. My God, I have a huge love for this movie. It is a part of the Grandma collection for me.
I'm not
course it is.
surprised. I'm not surprised.
Legendary Grandma collection. I feel
There
like,
it
you know,
is.
how sometimes movies get released as special collections. You know, Tarantino did the Rolling Thunder ones and all
Right.
that. I feel like you should do your own subset reissues of the Grandma collection, and it's just the greatest hits.
I'd buy that box set.
I'm
buy a
on
box
board
set
with that.
too.
Yeah.
Are you
We need a
overboard with
logo.
But it has to be in.
Overboard
That's awesome. I was going to say it has to be in Laserdisc. A Laserdisc box set.
Yeah.
That's
That'd
the
be
only.
like, be
That's
like
the only way it
$500.
works. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to cost you.
All right. Before we get into the movie, though, let's start with our segment, 6 Degrees of Reconciliation. David, I believe it's your turn. David,
Cool.
you're going to throw out a movie, and we're going to connect it to Overboard in as few moves as possible by the end of the episode. So we have the clock is ticking. What do you got for us?
Everybody likes on the spot homework. Well, it's more trivia. So of course I always like to go for movie releases of the same year. So I wanted to go for a summer blockbuster. So can you connect Overboard to Superman 4: The Quest for Peace? That is your assignment.
Okay.
Damn,
Probably
Quest for Peace.
kind of easy, right? I don't know. Maybe.
The best Superman movie there ever was.
That's an interesting take.
It's got to be someone's favorite Superman movie. I don't know who that person is, but
The guy who played Radioactive Man, or whatever that character's name,
Nuclear Man,
or Nuclear Man. He
Come on.
also can we link his hair to Kurt Russell's hair, because they're pretty similar.
It was
That's
bad.
what they're.
I mean, I think I
It
just
should
did
be.
it. One move. Kurt Russell's hair is in both those movies.
Somehow they scientifically took Kurt's hair and put it on that guy who I always used to think was shit. Remember Shadow Stevens? Anybody remember him?
Yeah,
I used
from
to think
Hollywood
Nuclear
Square.
Man-
Well,
I do
from
not.
what? Well, from national radio, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he was a very famous voice. But if you look at him, he looks like Nuclear Man. So
absolutely
Got it. All right. Now I have to
not
look
a
that
name
guy
you
up,
hear
too.
very often today. Shadow Stevens.
I think it's the first time I've heard it in my life. So
That's a really,
You don't know Shadow
more-
Stevens?
that's more
Very
often than
strong
ever
name.
before.
yeah.
He's still alive? I think he's still alive.
I'm just
Okay,
saying.
David, bring us back to December 1987. What's happening in the world?
In the United States, almost exclusively, good old Ronnie Ray still in the White House, getting ready for his last year in office. But he did host Mikhail Gorbachev that December for a summit that the U.S. had hosted with other folks. Of course, December 16th, it's Christmas time in America. Kids are getting their electric keyboards and portable dual cassette recorders, electric hockey and football tables. Always big hits. Madonna and Sean Penn were in the tabloids again over their potential divorce after 2 years of marriage. And in sports, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Hakeem Olajuwon, Charles Barkley, and Michael Jordan were at the top of the NBA, all of them being named to the All-NBA first team. Over in television, audiences were enjoying the fall debuts of Jake and the Fat Man, Full House, A Different World, Star Trek, The Next Generation, 30-something, MTV's Remote Control, and plus the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles would jump from the comics to the small screen in just a few short weeks after Overboard debuts in theaters. And on a side note, it seems like I feel like almost all of my friends had a Commodore 64, if not at this point within the next year. And I did not. I was still working on a TI-84.
Well,
and that would be the end of computers for the household until my brother got one in 1995, I think.
wow. So you didn't have a Commodore at all?
No, never did. But I'd go over to my friends. We would do print shop. We're making banners all the time.
That was the coolest.
The dot matrix printer with
dot matrix printer. It's like, welcome.
tabs.
Like, what the hell were we doing? But man, yeah. I mean, other games, of course, but the print shop was the big one for me on the Commodore 64.
How come those printers never run out of ink? My printer here nowadays runs out of ink every time I print like one page. It's like I can print one page full color, and then now I get notifications that my printer is out of ink every time.
Well, dot matrix printers, they use a ribbon similar to a typewriter, but of course they would store ink inside, and it was reusable. So they would go an extra mile because you're not putting a lot of ink on that paper with that heat transfer. So
I think we got to go back to that.
Absolutely. Wow. I don't think dot matrix has heat transfer. Never mind. Don't worry about that. Don't at me, nerds.
Don't at me.
You heard it here first.
Save that for our side podcast, ReconCineMatrix. Dot matrix.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
There we go.
ReconCineMatrix. Oh my
god. All right. So Overboard, when was the first time you guys saw this? EK, how about you? Did you see this in the theaters? Was this home video, a rental?
Well, I saw it as a kid, as a rental, but I have to say, like Goldie Hawn, I feel like I must have gotten some amnesia because I do not remember this movie at all. And I rewatched it. And I remember people going overboard, but I don't remember the plot of this. I didn't remember hardly anything. The end a little bit when, the way it sums up at the end, I kind of remember that. But this felt like a first time watch, which was pretty fun because I think this is the first time ever on this podcast that I didn't come in really aware of the movie I was going to talk about, with a long history. But this one, I think what happened, I gave it a little bit of thought, is that I saw it when I was young, and then I saw Captain Ron, and then in my mind, it was Kurt Russell and a boat in some way, and that I assumed I just knew Overboard really well, knowing that I knew Captain Ron really well. And today when I was watching it, I thought, why do I not know this movie? So it was a pleasant surprise. It honestly felt like watching it for the first time again. And that was interesting, to say the least, going in without all these memories.
So that's our belated holiday gift to you. We just gave you the gift of Overboard.
Yeah, a gem. It's rare to find a Kurt Russell movie I'm not incredibly familiar with. So, it's just crazy because it's one of those movies that's so popular and so known that I assumed I knew it really well. And it started, and I thought I don't really remember this scene much. And then as it went on, I realized, I really don't remember this movie. And so I just enjoyed the ride. It was fun. It was super fun to revisit. But
I think that's the case with a lot of people, though. I think there's a lot of people out there who assume that they love Overboard because they remember loving it when they were a kid, but they haven't seen it in forever. So right. I think there's a lot of people who are in that same spot.
Yeah.
Brent, what about you? When did you see this for the first time?
I saw it at the theater with my family when it released.
Really?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's
David can't believe it.
Yeah, David's in total shock. We went to a lot, I say that a lot too, and I think that's what's spawning David's reaction. But
because you go to murder movies when you're 4 or 5 years old, and then you see like romantic comedy. I'm like, holy shit, Brent sees all the cool shit. Like, this is amazing.
It never really occurred to me how many movies we did go see when I was growing up, but we saw a shit ton of movies growing up. I mean,
that's pretty awesome.
Like, we would definitely do, my father and I would do double features sometimes with my brother, but like, man, a lot of these movies I saw at the theater and I'm like, oh yeah, we saw this one too. But I saw it in the theater. I've seen it a few times over the years. I always have enjoyed it. I always thought it was great. It's not like my favorite Kurt Russell movie, but I think the chemistry between Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn is just freaking awesome in this. And
It's off the charts.
It's off the charts, guys. And it's the first time I ever saw this, and this is the thing that this is a true through line. Every single time I've seen it, I'm always super impressed with that friggin' shoe rack, man. I want a shoe rack that does that.
Yeah,
sure. It's like a shoe rack contraption that I'm like, dude, this carpenter can carpenter. And I'm like, that's friggin' rad, dude. So that's like the biggest thing I remember from the first time seeing it is the shoe rack. And I'm like, all right, that's badass. And then seeing it this time, it reminded me of a bunch of other stuff that I had kind of forgotten all about because I hadn't seen it in a while. But fun movie, good times.
Yeah, that shoe rack is something special, like the song at the end. That's what he's talking about, Randy Newman.
Boy.
Randy Newman. Any theme, any credits song by Randy Newman is special.
Oh yeah,
he really got around, didn't he? Boy,
he sure did.
He did.
He had his hands in all the cookie jars.
Yeah.
Yep.
David, what about you? When did you see this for the first time?
To be honest, it was, I think it was a TV movie of the week, kind of Saturday afternoon movie. I've always seen bits and pieces of it, but I realized I never really watched it from start to finish, ever.
Mm-hmm.
Seen lots of little bits of it, and there, and it was fine. I wasn't really enamored by any of this. I didn't really, I don't know. It was a weird little movie to me, but I was seeing in pieces and not with a lot of context. And I probably had to figure out what the actual storyline was after a couple of different pieced together viewings. So it never really sang that well for me. So to sit down and watch it purposefully was for this recording, just so I can watch it from start to finish. So that was my first complete viewing of it. And so it's a lot of it was very familiar though, but it had been so freaking long. I couldn't have told you anything about it. I forgot lots of different elements and stuff like that. And I kind of thought this can't be that good. It just can't. And the first half and the second half of the movie I think they're very different for their charms and stuff like that. So it's an interesting piece. So yeah, that's it. I do not have a relationship with this movie. I don't care about this movie. I don't, it's just one of those. It was never in the forefront. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's I'm always looking forward to your opinion when you're seeing an older movie like this pretty much for the first time now. So
yeah, right.
That modern perspective, whereas mine's very much the opposite because I have a deep relationship with this movie. This, as I mentioned, it's part of the Grandma collection, so it's a part of a series of films. It's like the Criterion collection, really. It's very near and dear to my heart. Movies that I saw with my grandmother, either in the theater or at home with her. Most of them, though, were a lot more violent. So movies like Avenging Force and Steel Dawn, that was kind of what we were watching. But this snuck its way in there. We saw this in the theaters, and I loved it. I mean, I also saw Big Trouble in Little China in the theater, as we talked about in our episode, which you can listen to in the archives at ReconCineMation.com. But and this was right on the heels of that. So it was cool Kurt Russell followed by cool Kurt Russell in the theater. So I was set with that. And my early memories of this are, that same thing as Brent, that closet, that the shoe rack was just blew my mind. And Kurt just looked cool. Goldie was awesome. Just their chemistry was great. And the Randy Newman song at the end, those were my takeaways for 20 years until I saw this again. And I kind of fell in love with it. I think I think if I had watched it like during college, I would have kind of probably tore it apart, and the nerdy film school side of me would probably have really gone after it. But I skipped that and saw it more recently, and I just embraced it all over again for what it is. It's not trying to be anything more than the light romantic comedy that it is, although there's a ton of problematic things that we'll talk about here that I think if it was anybody but Kurt and Goldie, they wouldn't get away with it. But because it is, I think that's the whole thing with this movie, that almost anything can happen here, and because Kurt and Goldie are so charming in it, that they get away with it. You're like, yeah, it's all right. Everyone all ends up in the best spot, at the end. So whatever they had to do to get there.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think I expected it to work so well for just on paper, as it's going. And then of course it isn't on paper. It's it's these performances between these really charming actors. So
yeah.
Definitely came out the other side of it with a different perspective on it versus expectations.
To me, this is like a defining 80s movie, that it's got likable actors and characters that on the surface everything's very light, and underneath you've got things that have aged kind of poorly, which is like, look at the John Hughes films, like, that were so well loved and beloved by our generation, but underneath the surface, like, there's so many things that haven't aged well. We talked about Planes, Trains, and Automobiles being the exception, that has probably gotten better with age, whereas the Brat Pack movies have gotten a little harder to love. Yeah, we tore into Dutch in our episode looking back at John Hughes's Dutch. Man, that was a tough one. That was 91, but yeah.
There's some likable moments of Dutch.
There's like two.
Like any of these movies. Like, and like this, the Overboard reminds me of like the Money Pit. Like, it's just this conflict of a couple in a interesting, wacky situation, and how do they, we're in mining comedy from that, and lots of physical humor and weird stuff like that. And it's just like this is like, this may as well be the Money Pit for me. Which I like. I like. Yeah, and I like it a lot. Like, I like that movie a lot. So
yeah, and that movie's carried by Tom Hanks and Shelley Long. Another one you can check out in the archives at ReconCineMation.com. But the same thing. Like, their charm carries over all the problems that you're encountering with the characters, or the way they behave to each other, or what they're doing. That overrules everything. But
it was big in the 80s to like, what's with all these like 30-something like white couples just going through something. Like, yeah. I feel like, and then maybe it's going to be a blow up, and I think that kind of element always permeated through other types of movies. Like, I don't know, does the Ghostbusters movie need like a romantic angle to it? Like, I don't think so, but that's what you did. Like, every movie always had the battle of the sexes in the 80s. I feel like no matter whether it's the forefront of that story, like if that's the actual A story, or if it's the B story, there's always a will they, won't they, are they going to get together? Of course they're going to get together. That kind of stuff. So it's a funny, and those kinds of stories are kind of cheap to make. It's love stories. It's tales old as time.
Yep. Feel good.
Yeah.
You gotta leave the audience feeling good about what they just watched, not on a downer. And I think it was just the formula back then. And it was interesting to see that shift in cinema, where it got away from that, and this real push to try and say, we don't have to have it resolved with boy meets girl and they fall in love. But I feel like for a long time, when they did try and avoid that, a lot of people still felt a little gypped, because that would have worked really well in that story had they just fallen in love, and you don't always get that. And so it's been interesting because I've watched several movies where the obvious choice was they would have gotten together, and you can tell the writers intentionally didn't want that to happen so that it would be unique. And I'm thinking, well, or he could have just wrote that and it would have been a little stronger in the story. But, back in the 80s, it seems like that was the go-to. You wouldn't deviate from that because it's where the money was, is you had to have everything resolved really nice and then tied up in a nice bow at the end.
Yeah. And I think it really does add a little something too, because these movies all, not all of them, but there is such a, like, if you were to avoid any romantic subplot for movies that aren't about romance or whatever, it's like these old school writers, all men, like writing about men doing crude things or just a certain type of comedy, and there's no real good entry point for women. And so the default way, well, how do we get more women into the theater? Well, add a woman to the cast and maybe she can fall in love with the guy. Maybe she'll fix that guy, and maybe that guy understand. Oh, I didn't know what I needed in my life, so I fell in love. And it's a very generalization of these broad, like, four square kind of movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I mean, that definitely, your example of like Ghostbusters, like trying to shoehorn in like the love story between Sigourney and Bill Murray and all that. But like, we're talking about a romantic comedy.
Oh, no, I understand.
The expectation here is that,
oh, I'm not expecting anything different.
Yeah,
I get you.
Yeah.
But
even in today's standards, like, we've like broken away, I think, from there being like that kind of formulaic element needed in every movie. But like, you go see a romantic comedy today, like, there's a formula. There's a formula still for that type of movie, and so like, I think for this, for me, the relationship between Goldie and Kurt on this is great, right? And I think that totally stems from, I think a lot of the reason that they have so much chemistry is because that they, have been together and are a real couple outside of Hollywood. And I think, when did they get together? It was like right after Swing Shift or during Swing Shift.
It was they started dating after Swing Shift. Yeah.
So sorry, I don't know off top of my head, but I bet John does. When was Swing Shift released?
Swing Shift, I believe that was 84. I want to say it was the first part of the 80s. So
okay,
they met way earlier in 1966 on the one and only Genuine Original Family Band, which was a Disney movie. That part of those when Kurt Russell was a kid and was doing the Disney movies. So
were they both in that? They were both in that?
She was in that. I don't think she had a big part, but they were on set together and they were friends. That was the first time they met, but they didn't start dating till 84.
Yeah, so they had years and years of like being together and building chemistry and stuff, and I think that shows here. I think the thing is like with a lot of romantic comedies, when they suck, it's when your two stars don't have chemistry. And even though like maybe the subject matter of this one, especially in today's terms, like kind of seems a little, I don't know, Dean seems a little sketchy. Like if you put him under the 2024 magnifying glass, even the 2020 magnifying glass, super sketchy. But I think the fact that they have that chemistry carries it even today. Like that's something that I noticed when I was watching it, that like I felt uneasy about a lot of some of the finer details of this, but like seeing them together and how they were working together, I was like, man, that's really nice to see.
Well, this is a vehicle that is really built for them. I mean, it's built for the Kurt and Goldie machine, that it is structured around their relationship, the characters and in real life. So, and they're working with Garry Marshall, who we're going to talk about, that you're talking about the formula of these romantic comedies. Gary is like the master of it and one of the creators of that formula. So, we went from the 1970s where like the vast majority of those films were dark, depressing endings, about relationships not working out, And we swing the complete other direction here in the 80s, where you start creating that formula and much more lighthearted, not really dealing with a lot of the heavy issues. It's just surface level, more having fun. And that's, where Overboard comes in 87. That's one of the prime examples of it. But again, I don't think if you didn't have all the three, that triangle working here of Garry Marshall, who's really this is his fourth film, but his first real, I think, impactful film for audiences. Garry and Kurt and Goldie, if you didn't have the three of them working together, I don't know if it would work as well. I don't know if there's another couple. I can't think of another couple at the time off the top of my head. You had things like Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner, who weren't a real life couple, but certainly had that chemistry, in front of the camera. So, maybe something like that would have worked here.
I don't know. Something about the two of them just really kind of clicks. Yeah. I'm more interested, I'm less interested in seeing a version of this without them in it, but I would be interested to see how much influence a different director would have, right? How large of an effect did Garry Marshall have on this? Because at this point, he'd obviously been writing and creating a bunch, but what had he directed up to this point?
Just to give the backstory on Garry, who's not really familiar with him, the man is a legend, especially in television. He came up as a TV writer for in the 60s for the Joey Bishop Show, the Lucy Show, the Dick Van Dyke Show, the Odd Couple. He created Happy Days. He created Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy. So 3 gigantic shows. And then he ran those, for the length of it, and then eventually moved into film. And he directed in 1982 Young Doctors in Love, then The Flamingo Kid, which I think was a Matt Dillon vehicle. And then in 86, Nothing in Common with Tom Hanks and Jackie Gleason, which is actually a really great film. And then it's Overboard. So I don't think, Overboard seems to be his first popular film. Maybe not at the time, but certainly over history. And then he follows that up with Beaches and Pretty Woman. So I don't think you can tell it's not as crisp here as it would get. Pretty Woman is sort of the perfect Garry Marshall film.
Right.
And you've got sort of the beginning formula of that here. It's not all the way there. Visually, it's not, as interesting. So still kind of figuring it out, but definitely need this step.
He's finding his rhythm and building towards, I think, I'm not trying to take this movie away from him. I think he's perfect as the director for this, and what he does later on in his career just solidifies that, but I would have a hard time seeing anybody else be in this movie other than Goldie and Kurt,
Yeah. Well, part of a good director is letting them just have their chemistry, that not over directing them.
Yeah.
That if he's giving them, if a director's giving him too many adjustments, then you're going to mess with that chemistry and start chipping away at it. And I think part of what worked so well is that he recognized that and just let them kind of be. I'm also want to give credit to Leslie Dixon, the writer, who was really just kind of beginning her career, but later on would go on to some major films: Outrageous Fortune, Loverboy, Look Who's Talking Now, don't forget that. But Mrs. Doubtfire, The Thomas Crown Affair, Freaky Friday, Hairspray. So some
Limitless,
pretty big
don't
movies.
Forget Limitless.
Oh, Limitless. Yes. Not a romantic comedy.
Not a romantic comedy at all, but
wow.
Yeah, she's had quite a career, actually.
She's had all the hits. Oh my God.
She's had a ton of
every
movies
one of
under her
them.
belt.
Yeah.
That you could do a lot worse with your screenwriting credits. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Good for her.
Yeah. So I think it's just another part of a good combination that's working here. But let's talk about the characters a little bit, because when we meet Dean Prophet, right away we're sort of on his side, right? He's the everyman, the down on his luck father that is trying to parent these kids. I mean, trying as best as he can, which is not very well, right?
Right.
Well, we don't meet the kids until she's in the picture, right? I mean,
right. But I mean, just in general, he's, we find out that he's widowed, somewhat recently widowed, and just moved to this town within the last 6 months.
That could be right.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
when you contrast that against what, I mean, who are we meeting at the beginning of this movie? We're meeting these
slob and
these
rich people.
Incredibly rich and arrogant and
80s rich too.
80s just dripping with like entitlement and
like the design,
is amazing.
the design of their yacht. Like, I don't know if real 80s rich people actually designed anything like that gaudy.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure they did. Are you kidding?
Movie 80s rich people are a different category than actual 80s rich people.
I feel there's like a lot of animal print in gaudy rich people's.
Joanna and Grant are so over the top. It's hilarious. Like, just the way they live their lives.
Absolutely. And it's disgusting. I mean, like, they're just despicable, right? And so, you contrast that against, like blue collar, working with his hands, trying to make ends meet. Like, it's easy early on to cheer for Kurt Russell in this, especially after he makes that fucking badass closet.
Yeah.
You're like, what? This dude's sickly talented, and she gets all butthurt because it's not a cedar closet. Get out of here, lady.
Everyone knows closets are made of cedar.
Everyone, every what did she say? Every civilized person or whatever knows that it's.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, and you have to, they make her so extremely mean that everybody on the boat, all of her staff, they all can't stand her. And eventually when she goes in the water, like nobody is missing her. Nobody cares. Nobody even really wants to look for her.
Yeah.
So she's got to be that disliked in order to go through this experience. And for the audience to be on board with Dean Prophet and everything that he's doing to her. So we need her to be that mean so that we can watch her go through this torturous kind of experience. And before that starts to wear off, before we start to change our feeling on her.
Yeah, I like her cartoon villainness of the character.
She does such a good job in this character too. I mean, it's really fun to see her in this role. And just how I think it's easy to overlook how good she could be given any situation. And for as campy and goofy as this movie is, she gives a full range, from beginning to end, from very believable in all areas too. At the end, which we'll get to, versus the beginning, those felt like two totally different characters, and yet they were the same character. And I think that's easy to overlook when you're watching kind of 80s romantic comedies, is you don't look for a lot of depth in acting. But for me, looking at this so many years later and not remembering it, I think that's what I was really kind of surprised by, was the quality of acting by her, especially in Overboard of all movies, is really good. She does a very good job with what she was given. I was surprised.
Goldie's totally underrated and not looked back on as, we look back at these decades of like, Meryl Streep, Susan Sarandon, like they were, everyone's sleeping on Goldie. She was really fantastic. And all of her films, like to this point, really, like Private Benjamin and Protocol and Wildcats, were all her characters all had to work really hard to overcome something that was kind of an ongoing theme with her. And here it's spun a little bit differently in that you dislike her so much that you don't want to see her overcome it. You just want to see her stuck in it for a while. And then there's, a certain point in the film when they start to have that real emotional connection that you're like, all right, like we can lay off now. You've done enough, But she's so good that she shows such a range in this movie in particular, that she goes from one end of the spectrum of being this horribly mean, nasty person to this lovable, beautiful, kind, considerate, mother.
Yeah. Once her life became about having to take care of other human beings, her whatever maternal instincts, the softness, the compassion that you need to actually like deal with children, came out of her. And like, it's like, so as a human, in her prior life, she never had access to any of those feelings, because clearly, like, her mother is also a character very briefly in the
Catherine Hellmond.
Hellman. And like, it's just these cartoonish villain characters that, so she was accessing parts of like humanity, and it came naturally. She wasn't even like fighting it, like, until she wasn't fighting it. Like, it just came as it, like, and I like that. You didn't have to like see her struggle with it. Like, no, this is who I am. Because even when she has amnesia, she's a total fucking asshole. Like, it's like, because that's who she was. Like, that's the only thing she had access to.
The funny thing about that, like, that's sort of what made me laugh this time. Like, they kind of barely mention how she gets amnesia, because she falls off the boat, and when she hits the water, she's okay, because the first thing she says is,
still
"Oh, my
yelling."
hair.
Yeah, exactly.
But then somewhere along the way, she, like, they said either it was the cold temperature or that she bumped into the like trash, whatever, and that's what gave her the amnesia.
Yeah.
So watching it this time, like, it doesn't even make sense how she got amnesia, but she also remembers everything. It's a very specific amnesia, because she remembers everything about everything except her own life.
Right.
Yeah, I actually really like that aspect of this story. I don't know. I guess in most films, it's a cliche that when you get bumped on the head and you have amnesia, that you don't remember anything and you have to start over. But what I liked was right away, her character just kept saying, this isn't who I am. This isn't what I would be doing. None of this feels right. And again, for a movie that's just Overboard, a fun comedy, there was some truth to that was kind of deep, because I sympathized with her thinking, is that possible? I've never had that happen to me. And I've never really seen that. I'm probably missing a big movie that's an obvious exception, but I typically have never seen anything like that, where a character has amnesia and is fully aware that they might not know where they're at, but they know it's not where they belong. And I thought that was really pretty powerful in the storytelling. And she didn't let up. She kept doing that the whole time, and I don't know who was responsible for that element of her character and writing that in, but that was really neat, because they could have easily just made her forget everything and start from scratch. And I think that made her more complicated.
Yeah. Is it like a deep psychological thing that she wanted to forget her own life, and here's your excuse to do it?
Yeah, who knows?
Here at Recon Cinema Studios, David and I have done a few experiments with all of our to try to kind of reenact what's happening here in Overboard. With all of our awards hanging around, we've got Oscars, we've got Emmys, Golden Globes, Grammys, we have them all here. David once in a while will just clobber me over the head to try to like get me into this Overboard level of amnesia. It's just an experiment. Hasn't worked yet, but we'll keep trying.
Right.
Yeah, good.
See, he's got to hit me the right way.
Yeah. Well, there is, because I think the classic amnesia is like, well, I don't know anything, and it's like it resets them to a blank slate of everything, all emotion and feeling and natural tendencies. And I think EK, you hit it. It's just like it's a really perfect way to to do it, to keep her like she's still the who she is. She just doesn't remember the details. And who she is a that nasty character. For the whole, I think that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, and I think it complicates her in a way that makes us sympathize right away with her, even though we know she was a horrible character at the beginning. No matter how much you don't want to like somebody, knowing that they're in this situation where they don't know where they're at, but they're aware that they know they're not supposed to be there, is really, you can't just kind of look past that. Even though she's like a bad person at the beginning and mean, she's still a human. And it really does humanize her. Like right away, you're like, well, maybe she wasn't nice, but she doesn't deserve this, and it's really, I don't know. I found that pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Well, and that's what starts how do you guys feel about Dean? That, what he's doing to her is pretty horrible. We get why he's doing it. He's really down and out. Like the job he was doing for her with the closet with a shoe rack was $600, which was, in 1987, $600. That's what is that now, David? That's
$2,000?
probably $2,000. And he's
1.5
as
million.
we find
1.5 million for that.
Yeah.
For that.
Thereabout.
For that shoe.
Had it been in cedar.
1.5 million.
Yeah.
Had it been in cedar.
The cedar price. He really needs that money. They don't have a lot of money. They're he doesn't have a lot of business coming in for his his handyman work or whatever, whatever he's trying to do. So we're kind of sympathize with him too, right? In that he's getting some semblance of revenge for her being so mean, and not only firing him and not paying him the $600, but what was worse was when she pushes him into the water and then she throws all of his tools.
Oh, yeah. Thank God the bucket floats.
Yeah, that was
for
lucky.
a minute.
Yeah.
But he says he lost all of his tools, so we, I assume that went under. So that's like a lot. Now that's a big expense, and he can't even do his job.
It's complicated.
She nasty.
What I think is complicated about Kurt's situation with her is, although when you watch this film, you know that what he's doing is not a good thing, and he's essentially kidnapping her, he also is the only one that comes to take her out of her situation when she's been abandoned by everybody else. Not only her husband, who runs a different way, but everybody in a position of authority runs the other way too and can't wait to get rid of her, which is so sad because she's already got amnesia on top of it. So I don't think his intentions were good at all, but in a weird roundabout way, her situation gets better just for the sole fact that she gets out of a really bad situation by this creep coming to her aid for his own needs. So it complicates the story so much. And I think that continues through the entire film. It never gets easy to make a decision on his actions and if they were okay or not. And it starts right at the very beginning right here is, he was kind of the guy who helped her, but he also did not help her. It's really a strange story.
I mean, that's a great point. And it kind of goes both ways, right? Because he needs her as well, as we find out, throughout the movie, because the kids are kind of utterless and just have no discipline and things like that. And he's not able to really do all the things that he needs to do to raise them in a balanced environment. Right. And so, they kind of save each other a little bit, which is, I think, pretty important.
That's not his intention, though. His intention is
no,
not
his
good.
intention,
like,
is
to make her work off of. Yeah, his intention is to make her work off the money that she owes.
Oh, yeah, and the fact that he's like propositioning her, like kind of the first night, you're like, oh, dude, that is super sketchy.
I don't think it was that serious though, because he's not like sexually. They don't portray him as like sexually attracted to her at all till way deeper in the movie.
I agree. But let's say she didn't turn him down.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I will push back and say that his buddy and him have a conversation the very first night where he's like, hey, she's pretty hot, so he's clearly sexually attracted to her. He's just maybe not making a move because he just wants his house cleaned. But I think what makes it weird is they do help each other. And obviously by the end, that's what the story is that they kind of filled a void in each other's lives. But only one side was aware of the truth. She didn't voluntarily give up her life and come help him. And I think that's what makes this story complicated, is that it works out, but it works out in a kind of Stockholm syndrome way, not necessarily in an organic way.
Well, yeah, and she's living in a world where she can have, like, she thinks she has everything, right? Like, she doesn't know what she's missing because she thinks she could just buy whatever she wants.
Yeah.
I mean,
and she doesn't have to treat anybody with kindness, including, anyone on her staff, and Roddy McDowell and Andrew, her.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Her one-liners. Is English even your first language? I was like, oh wow.
She's got some great lines here.
Yeah.
But Dean is gaslighting her right from the beginning. And really badly, creating a full fake background, and all of it being terrible, to make her feel bad about herself, and kind of, to do all this. Like, not only is he kidnapping and gaslighting her, but he's like
making fake pictures. Like, I mean, he's
I mean, and technically
the deception runs deep.
Yeah, and later where they actually, have sex, like, one could say that that's a form of rape in a way.
I thought about that, but my thought is, by that point in the story, even though she's unaware of who he is, they have built a relationship at this point. It wasn't him just abducting her and, forcing himself on her. That, to me, that gets to that point in the story, although it's still cringy, it's more kind of like a deceptive husband cheating on his partner. Like, they still care for each other now at this point. It wasn't just a total stranger approaching her. So it's weird because, again, it complicates things, where had he have done that night one, that would have just been considered rape. But by doing it, who knows how far they in weeks and weeks in at this point, and she's bonded with his family and everything else, and they've developed a real love for each other, even though she still doesn't know who he is. It reminds me of more of like a spy movie where the guy then reveals he works for the CIA and his wife never knew. It doesn't mean that they didn't care for each other. It just means that they didn't care for each other knowing the full truth. That's what's strange about this.
Yeah. I mean, the levels of lies and deception that you might portray on people, which I do all the time, I can't give them everything. I can't give them the truth all the time. So if they fall in love with me, it's like
it's their own fault.
It's just like, it's not, if my intention was to go to bed with them, that would be wrong. But if they fall in love with me and like, we're just going to have you know what? I'm into you too. Cool. Like, then I think, you can make a lot of excuses. You can't deny attraction.
His intent was to just make her a slave. It's not his fault she fell in love with him.
Kidnap, held her against her. Lied to her about her identity.
Be my nanny.
Entire time. Raise my children.
It's like,
she's so good in that whole stretch of the movie where she's just basically like, thrown into a hurricane of insanity, and just that look of shock and bewilderment and overwhelming, and at certain points, like, really making an effort to, like, do this stuff that he wants her to do. And she's just, again, kudos to Goldie, because she's just so wonderful in this movie.
Yeah, I have a question for you guys, a serious question now, a hypothetical, I guess. I feel like the whole plot hinges on how well that shoe rack had been built, because that's what justifies him kidnapping and forcing her into labor and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So my question is, had he built a really mediocre piece of cabinetry, would this story have never even taken off in the first place? Because everybody watching it would have said, well, she's not working that off. That wasn't even worth that in the first place, because everybody was so impressed by his shoe rack. Right. This is a believable story now. It's like, she has to work this off because That craftsmanship was so good.
100%. This movie's based around the success of that shoe rack because that's easily a $10,000 shoe rack.
Yeah.
$1.5 million shoe rack. He's only trying to charge her $600. This guy's giving it away.
Yeah.
And she gives him that kind of shit and throws his tools in the water on top of it. Look, what he did was wrong, but I get it.
It's wrong, but understandable.
Yeah.
Brent might have done the same thing.
No.
We've all done something like this, just maybe not at the scale. This is a major scale.
Well,
I was in wood shop in high school, and I built a toolbox that looked a lot like the toolbox he lost in the water, and I built a birdhouse. None of them had cranks or adjustable paneling. This guy's next level.
Yeah.
And I aced that class, guys.
Well, and let's go a little bit further into the movie here. What's Dean's goal? Dean's goal in life here is to make this miniature golf course with his buddy, played by Mike Haggerty.
Who's also
right?
great.
And I love how the sense of time in this movie is non-existent because, I mean, it seems like she should have been with him for months at this point because not only do they meet the investors to pitch the mini golf course, which is another scene I love where they're just passing around the hand-drawn.
Drinking beers, just having a good time.
Like, I know all the pitches that I do. I definitely walk in with a couple of beers for sure.
That's how you get it done. That's how you seal the deal.
Yeah.
But they get the money and then immediately cut to all of the courses at all the statues and everything are like 80% built at this golf course.
All the coding's been cleared, everything. Everything. They got all their licenses.
4 days, guys. 4 days. That's the entirety of the time that has elapsed throughout the course of this movie.
Although one could argue that, coming from someone who has lived in a small town, they didn't have a whole lot going on there. So they could have rushed this a little bit. This was the first big idea with some real money behind it to come to this town in a while. Maybe they pushed this up in the city council.
You're probably right. Elk Grove is not a very busy town.
Yeah.
I do like that they're building this course just sort of in the middle of a field too. It's not like in a, because you figure, I mean, you go to a modern mini golf course, but even in the 80s, I went to a mini golf course. It's built on top of cement foundation, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And you build on top, they're just well, just built in the grass and it's on decking and all that. And it's not like I can't imagine that's zoned for actual business.
But they actually built it and they left it there. They donated it to the town.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Functioning mini golf course.
Yeah. Elk Snout. I mean, that's not the name.
Is that the name of it?
Town. No, they kept calling it Elk Snout in the movie, but
it was.
I think it's Mendocino.
Right? They shot at Mendocino. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I think it's actually Elk Cove. I think I said Elk Grove, but it's Elk
Isn't
Cove.
it Elk Grove? It's Elk Cove.
You know what? They say a bunch of different things.
They call it Elk Snout 90% of the time. I think the only time you ever see the actual name of the town is at the very beginning when they show you the welcome to Elk, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
What is Elk?
Yeah.
Elk. I don't know. Yeah. Elk Cove. Sorry.
I guess it makes sense. It is a cove.
It's a cove.
There's a couple of other familiar faces that pop up in this movie. Did anybody catch Ray Combs as the security guard, I think, at the hospital?
Yeah.
100%. I was like, wait, that guy's a game show host too.
Yeah, Family Feud.
Yeah.
He was our Family Feud host. Okay,
that's right.
Pre Steve Harvey or pre the guy from Home Improvement and post Richard Dawson.
Yeah. And this is the only movie he's in. Right? I read somewhere this is the only movie he ever did.
Yep. It was this and Family Feud, and then he unfortunately passed away many years ago. But the great Ray Combs. I also love the doctor in the hospital, who's a face I recognize from so many different TV shows in the 80s. But I also love how he quietly mentions that he'll pay the reward to anyone who picks up Joanna from the hospital.
Yeah.
Like,
Dr. Norman Corman.
yeah.
That doctor? Yeah.
No, not that doctor.
Okay.
The one in the hospital. But her psychiatrist, that's Dr. Norman Corman, is maybe my all-time favorite character in this movie.
Yeah.
He is hilarious. And if I were casting this now, there's no way I wouldn't put Alan Arkin, the late Alan Arkin, in that role.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And we also see Hector Elizondo show up very briefly as working at the waste disposal. He's the person who actually finds Joanna in the water.
Yeah, that was crazy. I just literally watched 2 days before I watched this Necessary Roughness with my son. He plays the head coach in that, and I was like, oh shit, this guy's everywhere.
Hector is in every one of Garry Marshall's movies, and a lot of times he plays that like guardian angel type role, like the Mr. Bean type role from Love Actually, that kind of character. So but yeah, was in every one of Gary's films.
Edward Herman though, right? As Grant.
Absolutely.
Ed Herman as Grant. Like this was pre how I picture Ed Herman. Like I always picture him like just maybe probably 2-3 years later, where he only looked like that version of him until he passed away. Like, it's like that's my version. So it was cool to see him like just seem like a different, younger version. Like obviously younger, but like just this different guy in that role.
Yeah.
And he's scared of such a shit. I just love it.
Grant is so awesome. He is like the partying that he does when Joanna's like the way he's dancing and with the clothes he's wearing, like, oh my God. And everyone else, like Roddy McDowell, like they're all drunk on the like they're all, I guess, forced to party with him too.
Yeah, because he's got to pay his staff to be his friends,
He's so great, If anybody who's a huge Lost Boys fan is going to love him, but I love at the end when he's going crazy and he's like, I'm a god at the sea, and he lets out this laugh that's so funny. I was laughing out loud when he's laughing. He's like, ha ha ha, and he's great. He doesn't have a whole lot of scenes, but he's very present when he's in the scene. You're watching him, and I think he played that character really well.
Yeah. You can pretty much, imagine, all the other stuff he's doing, like probably Scarface level of cocaine that he's doing just off camera.
Yeah.
And this is coming right after Lost Boys, so he's really on a hot streak here.
Yeah.
Is this really after Lost Boys?
Yeah.
I feel like he was older in Lost Boys. Every time I think of him nowadays, all I think of him is it's kind of the same role, except he's less a dick about things. But Gilmore Girls, I'm like, okay, yeah,
right. I just kind of picture him as the Gilmore Girls,
the proper father type,
Yeah.
Well, that's what he settled into, by like the early '90s. Those are the kinds of roles he just that was his thing.
Yeah. Man, I got to go back and watch Lost Boys. It's been a minute.
Yeah, that's the only thing I know him from. So right when I saw him, I could only see his character from Lost Boys, and it was great. It was really fun to see him in this role, because I don't know if you do this, but sometimes I do, where I imagine it's the same universe, and I think, well, if he wasn't a vampire, this is the life he'd be living, is still really over the top. And I thought the same thing with Kurt, because it's so close to Big Trouble. I'm like, maybe this is Jack Burton's story continues, and he actually had escaped his crappy life and his kids to go on an adventure, and he's just back to his day job, and we're just picking right back up in Jack's normal boring life. That's what I kept thinking that, and I thought it was funny.
Does that mean his deceased wife then is Kim Cattrall? Is that
No, I had imagined that
depressing.
He had this whole life and he escaped it, he's like, honey, I can't take this anymore, I'm going to be a truck driver. And then he goes out and he has this adventure, and then when he says, that's why he can't be with them at the end, he goes back home, and this is what he goes back home to.
Gotcha.
I can definitely see Jack Burton and Dean Prophet being related to each other for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, they look so similar,
They do. tank tops and big hair.
Both
a
have
lot of
great
white
hair.
tank tops. Yeah,
A lot of Kurt Russell characters could be related to
yeah, the
each other.
KRCU.
Yeah.
We should really go through it all again and just figure out how they all link to each other.
They're just all they're all brothers, right? And they just get in their own line of shit. And that's
specifically Stargate. We got to make sure that mixes in.
Man.
Or maybe there was a different version of Multiplicity, but it was with Kurt Russell. And these are all of his clones going off and having their own adventures.
I love it.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
Well, and I thought about how like Kurt showed up in the Marvel universe and Guardians 2, and you see his character de-aged
to
in
this
the 80s
movie.
And it's like straight up like it's like, is he wearing that I'm sure he's not actually wearing the actual costume, but it's like, oh, it looks just like the perfectly coiffed hair and just his jawline and the way he's wearing a jacket. And it's just, you can tell that's something off because it's not him 40 years ago, but it's like they really nail how Kurt Russell looked in the mid 80s. It was just a nice reminder because they really kind of hit it better than I thought.
Especially in that picture that he, the wedding picture that we see that he's doctored to put Joanna in it.
Yeah.
But that look is almost exactly what they used for the opening of Guardians 2. It's like that very specific longer haired look for Kurt. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, that's what they used in Guardians 2.
Yeah. They had
I don't know if that's true, but it looks so similar.
That's good. Good theory.
Another bit of trivia here, that Dean's pickup truck, this is not the last time that we would see that pickup truck in cinemas.
No.
In fact, does anybody know what movie it would pop up in just 2 years later?
I think I do.
I do for sure.
Okay, you go ahead. Yeah, I think I know, but I'm curious. Yes.
Christmas Vacation.
Yeah, that's what I
nailed
saying.
it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it shows up in the opening, that opening sequence in Christmas Vacation. So, and maybe that's Dean. Maybe that's supposed to be Dean. Who's
they sold that truck and they are living in a mansion.
Yeah,
I'm sure he continued to work, but he could have easily been a kept man, I think, for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
How do you spell Porsche? I love that part.
My guess is he sold the truck to Billy, and that's Billy and his buddies.
Yeah,
probably true. Yeah.
They're jerks.
Yeah.
One thing that jumped out at me this time too is that, he really doesn't have any mementos, or there's no scene where the kids kind of like think about their real mom. Nobody seems to really be sad about or miss the real mom, whoever she was.
Right.
Yeah. They don't have any of her old clothes because he sends them to the Goodwill to buy stuff for Annie, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, and granted they moved, right? So okay, they probably cleared a bunch of stuff out, but yeah, why not? You don't even have a single picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the kids
somewhere.
The kids never have that moment of like wow, like I've got a new mom and it's not really real, and I know it's not real, but like I really miss my mom. Like none of them have that. We never see that scene.
Yeah, no emotional depth with the kids at all. Although I may be jumping the gun, but my favorite part of this entire film is the youngest kid who speaks like Pee Wee Herman.
Pee Wee Herman?
Oh
yeah.
I just think it's so funny. Every time he talks, I laugh.
That kid's great.
Kid? Is that the kid from Problem Child?
No,
it's not, right?
No.
Okay.
No. I think the only kid that I've seen was I think Jared Rushton, who's in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah, that's the only thing
He's in a couple things. We'll talk about it in a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
I can't wait.
Well,
get excited.
But like I mentioned it earlier though, like how I get for the uninitiated though, it's like the you get where the conflict is set up in the opening on the boat, and then where they get, and then but there is a level of sliminess that it really, the charm of the characters and the lightness of everything offsets it. But I'm just like, it's so slimy, the way he talks to her and treats her, because it's not even like he's using her, but he purposely treats her like, just like garbage, right? And just always calling her sweetie, and just like and because she's such a terrible person, like everyone around her always disregards her. So even if she's actually speaking truth or being emotionally honest or what or anything, like nobody cares. And I had to like just remember. I'm like, all right, remember, it's a payback. It's like a revenge thing. That when he finally like reveals it, like it's like, yeah, that's what you get for being a terrible person. Like that was the goal. But then everything flipped. And I think it was like when she prepared dinner and then her hands are glued to plates.
Yeah.
And then she
shoots him with the hose.
She shoots him with the hose, and then Dean is laughing and smiling and loving, and they all love it. And I was like, that was it. I was like, oh, that's it. That's the moment where I turned. Because it's like, because he could have been like a big shithead about it, like spraying water all over the house. What are you doing? Don't do that to me. Kind of like, it's like he's like loving it. Like he can't believe this woman's doing it. I think, or just the vibe of it. It's like,
well, but that's also. Well, I was just gonna say that's also the moment where she also, just in general starts to feel like part of the family. Because I think the next scene is when they're at school and she rips into the kid's teacher. And you're like, oh, she's like in, like she's like defending the kids now. Like she's taking Mama Bear ownership of the Cubs. Like this is like, it's on now. Like, this is done.
Yeah. Cause like, that's exactly where she becomes part of the family.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that's the nature of their family, of like the way that house is operates, and they're all just it's not the nicest place, and things can be dirty, and
she's spraying that hose the whole time I'm watching. I'm like, there's no fucking way, dude, I'd lose my shit.
But by the way,
spraying the hose everywhere in the house, that's crazy.
Dean is disgusting. Like he's a complete slob and has no interest in ever cleaning anything. I mean, that house is a mess.
But
like
gross.
One little thing, like when Billy like tosses him a beer and he cracks it open and he just dumps out like
flicks the head of the beer onto the floor.
The head on the floor. Like, oh yeah.
What are you doing, man?
I just think it was like there, and it's the way this movie's done. Maybe it's the way the Garry Marshall of it all, like the comedy and the thing. Nothing is ever heightened to the only heightened things are just how extreme she is like this terrible, like rich, entitled woman. Like it's such a villain cartoon, and he's kind of a cartoon in his treatment of her as the revenge. So they both get to be these extreme, and then it all settles down, and they can kind of just be people. And and then the things that are comedic and purposely so aren't. All right, everybody, check it out. We're doing comedy. Like I just love how comedy of it, of like this type of film is just like we're just going through the pace of it. We don't have to like highlight, like we know this is funny, we trust it, we're not going to wait a beat or or anything like that. It's just that style back then was so well done, where it's like I think eventually like there's so much hand holding and a lot of like accessible comedy for other things. And I think we're turning a page where over the last decade of like where comedies can be funny and the heart of the characters are important to that comedy. You can't just have shtick and all that. And I mean there's always been heart or whatever, but I think like I don't know, there's just something different. This is the throwback. You don't see this kind of stuff, I think, right? I don't know, maybe, but I don't watch a lot of modern romantic comedy, so what do I know?
This is very natural to this world and these characters, that they don't have them doing like extreme things that don't, just for the sake of comedy. Like it's really about more of their emotional kind of connection in a way, that developing that and her arc and her change.
Yeah, so I really like that part.
Yeah, and all that leads to, I think, what is like the climax of the movie is really well done. That when Grant finally, well, first Catherine Hellman forces Grant to go find Joanna,
Right.
Yeah.
and then just his mere showing up, like unknowingly, like jogs her whole memory, and she
Instantly.
and that scene where she walks in the house and then walks out and realizes that she knew Grant, she remembered everything. And then she goes up to like kind of celebrate with Dean and then realizes like, wait a minute, what did this guy do to me? Like, she's so good in that scene, that turn that she does. And then going, and then just building that wall, that Joanna wall. She goes, switching from Annie back to Joanna, building that wall between her and Dean and her and the kids, that she just like rejects them and leaves after all that.
Yeah, because she has to, right? She's supposed to be.
Got me.
You gotcha.
Yeah, the kids chasing after her. That was tough. That was a tough moment.
Yeah, and you see her like struggling with it. That she's just reacting and doesn't really feel that way. But I think her reaction is justified, and we as the audience sympathize with her by this point.
Yeah.
She's been through enough, and not that she should go back to her other life, but she at least deserves to have a say in what happens to her.
Yeah.
And then, I love seeing her, once she's back on the boat, they're like, now she's the total opposite. That now she's Annie on the boat, that she's like doing shots, like she's showing the staff how to do tequila shots as if, they wouldn't know, but
yeah. And she's acting like a host, like, oh, I thought maybe you'd be hungry, like wouldn't got you stuff, and what's that? And then she's like wants a beer versus champagne, because like everyone just casually drinks champagne because you're rich, right? Like the cartoonish evil again.
Yeah, she comes back much more grounded.
Yeah.
And likable.
She's not struggling. And she's so likable, and she's not struggling with that. Like, she realizes the kind of person she was and all that. She apologizes to the staff. And it's really cool. It's just
redemption. It's a redemption tour.
Yeah. Yeah. And they got
kids
together at the end. Oh.
Yeah, the kids, finally motivate Dean to go do something, and then Billy's got friends in the Coast Guard, and they pulled some strings, and
apparently there was a scene in the movie that they cut where Billy was actually hanging out with his Coast Guard friends at the bowling alley beforehand, and they used like real, like it was like Garry Marshall's kid is one of the people on the boat. He's the guy on the mic, like giving all the updates, kind of the squirrely kid, but everybody else is a real Coast Guard, like they're real Coast Guard members. Mm-hmm. So I can only imagine that scene is pretty stiff. Right. But yeah, apparently they did have a scene in there that kind of introduced them at a different time, but it works. I buy it. Billy's got friends in the Coast Guard. Why not?
Yeah,
you gotta have connections.
And we finally get our big romantic ending and the call back to the story of Arturo and Katerina that they bring up earlier. The night that Dean and Joanna really do fall in love. So the romantic, the big diving in the water, and they swim towards each other, and it looks like, watching it now, looks like nobody's, like they're swimming but no one's really moving. It's just the magic of editing. But yeah, it's a great ending. Then the family's together, and we sail off into the sunset with our Something Special by Randy Newman, beautiful ending song, and that's our happy ending. And
we find out that all the money is hers. Like,
yes,
right. So now Dean and co are while the kids are making their Christmas lists. It's like July, and they're making their Christmas lists. Got to get a Porsche.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a happy ending for everyone. So perfect 80s ending. Yeah, everybody gets what they wanted. But we never got an Overboard 2. That's what I wanted.
Yeah, you know what? It all worked out.
We did get the remake.
Yeah, that is part 2.
Even more over. What would you call Overboard 2? Still Overboard?
Even more overboarder.
More overboarder.
Look who's overboard now.
There it is. Nailed it.
Nailed it. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Should we check out how it did at the box office and do a little box office glory?
Oh yeah, let's. But hold on one second. I wanna throw out one bit of alternate casting. So Billy was originally supposed to be played by John Candy. But John Candy couldn't do it because of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, so they pivoted.
Oh, wow.
But think about that for a second.
Ooh, that character explodes with potential at that.
I feel like the part would have had to have been like, I feel like it would have changed a lot, right? Like he would have kind of commanded, not that John Candy would have been on set being like, I need more scenes, but like John Candy's a big star.
Yeah.
I feel like Billy would have been and he was in it quite a bit, but I feel like Billy would have been maybe have stolen some of the focus from what was going on.
Oh, for sure.
If it had been John Candy.
If that were Candy, there would have been more screen time for that character, more
absolutely.
For that character to do, probably more with his girlfriend, like there would have been more for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad he stuck with Planes, Trains.
Oh, no doubt. So does 1987's box office.
Yeah. That's a movie that I've mentioned it before. We've already covered it. It's in the archives. But since we covered it, I kind of want to cover it again because I think that movie has gotten so much more momentum in the last couple of years that the love for it and these last 2 or 3 years has grown a lot.
It's because of you guys' podcast though. Like it was before I was on the show. You guys killed it.
Yeah.
It's the Recon bump.
Yeah, it's the Recon bump.
If we ever do a version 2.0, it'll be that one. So, all right, let's see how it did at the box office. Overboard had a $22 million budget. It was shot in Mendocino, California, and good old Raleigh Studios here in Hollywood. It opened December 16th, 1987 at number 7. Number 7.
That's not great.
Not great. It was up against the other new releases were Raw, Batteries Not Included, which we covered. You can check it out in the archives. And Leonard Part 6.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
classics.
Leonard 6, the Bill Cosby movie?
Yes.
Oh, that's a Bill Cosby movie.
I saw that in the theaters too.
Oh, God.
I saw Ghost Dad in the theater. Come on.
Ooh, nice.
So it landed right between Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in week 4 and Fatal Attraction in week 5. It had a $1.8 million opening weekend, a grand total of $26.7 million domestically. It was the number 42 movie of 1987, right between Police Academy 4, which I believe is Citizens on Patrol, and Baby Boom. And top at the box office in 87, 3 Men and a Baby, Fatal Attraction, and Beverly Hills Cop 2. So obviously theatrically was not where its money was really made. I think it's home video and rentals and, like you said, David, playing, Saturday afternoons on maybe WPIX, WWOR, WGN, one of those kind of channels. That's where the legacy of this movie was made. And I think a lot more people, this was a very frequent rental at video stores. And this really is, I think, Kurt and Goldie's kind of like legacy as a couple on screen. I mean, they were in Swing Shift together where they started dating. They're in this, and then they're not in another movie together until Christmas Chronicles.
Hey, if you're going to show back up together, make it that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When his hair is in full effect once again, she comes back.
His
Look,
Santa
is
Claus, his Kris Kringle
Yeah.
hair is legit.
That's like top 3 hairdos for him all time.
Yeah. I think they even pumped it up more for the sequel, man. Like they really got in there. Just
Yeah. She couldn't resist. She saw she probably visited him, brought him some coffee on set or something, saw that hair and said, I just gotta
She's
be
like,
in this.
I gotta be Miss Claus.
Sorry, you're fired. I'm in this now.
Jingle bells, buddy.
Has his hair ever not been perfect? I mean,
No.
it has so many different like iterations of his hairstyle, right? Like there's
I'm not a fan of his hair in Stargate.
Stargate,
crew
the
cut?
buzz
Oh,
cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not
I mean-
I'm just putting it out there.
When you have
that's not Kurt hair.
When you have the possibilities that his hair has, why limit it so much? With a buzz cut.
Right.
Yeah. It's too high and tight for Kurt.
Yeah.
I think it was that point in the career for his hair when his hair wanted to show that it had more versatility and took a real daring risk by doing Stargate, and then its hair immediately realized that was not the right choice.
Totally jumped the shark.
Yeah, so blame his hair for that one, not him.
That's Charlize Theron playing ugly,
Yeah, exactly.
in Monster.
I'm not buying it, guys.
Yeah.
The his hair in like Big Trouble, this Tango and Cash, they're all sort of like variations of that same general look, which is just pure
Perfect.
Kurt. I mean, that's prime Kurt hair. But I will say in the more recent years, like Guardians 2 and Christmas Chronicles, total hair comeback.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's signature, baby.
Yeah.
Throwback. It's throwback.
Like, I mean, as and we're about to celebrate his, I believe, 73rd birthday, and he, that's Kurt's spirit is so much younger than that, and it does not feel like he's anywhere near that age. But his hair is still going way strong.
Yeah. 73 years, man. Wow. He does not look a day over the age of the computer that wore tennis shoes.
Yeah, exactly the same.
From 68 or whatever.
Yeah.
I will say another thing that I love about this movie is the poster. This is one of my all-time favorite movie posters, that the two of them, Kurt and Goldie, just falling off they've both gone overboard, but it's the look on their face. They're just like, I don't know, we love each other.
Let's see how this goes.
Yeah, let's see what happens. We're in midair. I just think it's another one of those that totally captures the spirit of the movie. So
yeah,
it adorns my office wall.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
you've been wallpapered.
Yep. It's just the wallpaper. It's not a poster on the wall. It's the actual wallpaper.
Just wallpaper.
It's all, every wall has a different part of Kurt on it.
That's actually true.
Yeah.
All the parts, even the naughty ones.
So what do you guys think? Audiences today, a more younger audience, I mean, do you think they're going to like Overboard? Do you think they're going to, hang in there with it?
Yeah.
I think they're going to shit all over it, man. Are you kidding? Like, based on just the sensibilities of nowadays, like it doesn't really fly, dude. That whole the whole thing is
the
tough to
gaslighting
swallow.
stuff.
Yeah, it's tough to swallow, but it's still fun. I'm hanging on to it.
I think the story can be seen still in more current, or not more current, but films that came after that. But I think what the pivotal thing is the gender that's doing the manipulation, because the one that I would compare this to later would be, and I know it's a bad movie, you guys have to forgive me, is Mr. Deeds with Winona Ryder and Adam Sandler. And it's the same idea where she just deceives him the entire time to get a story. and he falls in love with her, and her lies just keep going and going and going until there's this moment where it all comes to a head. And her intents were just so bad the whole entire time. But the difference being that he wasn't a horrible person, so it's not like he deserved to be lied to. And also there's just something about her character manipulating him that comes across as less creepy and predatory than him, manipulating her. And I think that's the only way I could maybe see it still adapting to today's audience, of because it's not like this is a new scenario. It's just that it's a delicate subject if you're going to try and make a comedy out of it.
Well, and that's why they swapped the roles in the remake.
Oh, I haven't seen the remake, so
yeah. So Anna Faris actually plays the Kurt Russell character.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Deeds is a better example. I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't disagree. I'm actually agreeing with you that in a modern audience they'd have to swap it, which that's what they did.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so that's what I think is the way it ages in today's climate, especially. It would be a weird story to tell, and I think a lot of people would be scratching their heads and saying, "What's funny about this?" And but I think a lot of people like us look back at it and go, "Well, it was lighthearted, and what a great cast," So it's interesting.
I enjoyed it, and I'm glad this movie exists. But as per usual, it's sort of like I don't really need to see this movie again, because not really. I mean, it's really good, like for what it is, but because I don't have a connection to it, like this isn't a movie that I'm gonna like rush to go back to, like for any reason.
I think this one's. I think people our age who saw it as a kid are gonna have a stronger connection with it.
Yeah, of course.
Definitely than seeing it as an adult for the first time.
Yeah. I think for people who are, I don't know, like maybe if you're a young Goldie Hawn fan, or maybe a young Kate Hudson fan, and you're learning about her and you figure out, oh, her mom was an actress as well. And, like maybe you go down there, but I don't know that.
I think now that you said that, I think if you want to see really good Goldie Hawn, like this is a great example of it here.
Well, right. Yeah. This, I mean, I would watch this, Private Benjamin, Wildcats, man. Like, dude, Goldie Hawn was badass.
She was,
I mean, she still is badass.
Wire.
She's alive. She's still kicking ass.
Yeah.
But she did a lot of great things in the 80s.
Yeah. We just don't see her as often. She's, I'm not going to say she's semi-retired, but she's very selective in what, parts she does now. She doesn't have to work. Yeah. So. Kurt likes working, and they have their wine, and that's where a lot of their focus is. But Kurt still works a little bit more often. So
yeah, I'm gonna agree with David though. It's not a film that I think I ever really need to see again, and it's not that I love Kurt. I think that Goldie gives an incredible performance. I think there's a lot of great humor and a lot of heart in here. But it's not something, given all the movies ever made in the world, that I would go, I need to watch this one over all of the
Overboard
movies.
Night.
Yeah, and so I think if you're a Kurt Russell fan or a Goldie Hawn fan, it's definitely worth watching. But I would say, as far as his overall filmography, for me, it's kind of a one and done. I think you need to know it. If you're a Kurt fan, why would you not at least have seen it once? But it's not one like Big Trouble or something that I'm going to go back to time and time again. But it was fun. It was really fun to revisit. And the story is a little problematic, but the way they handle it, like you said, with the kids not even acknowledging their dead mom, is so lighthearted that it's not so heavy that it makes it worse. I think if they would have really pushed hard on a serious tone, it would have made this even more uncomfortable to watch. But because they keep it pretty lighthearted, it just moves on. I think the pacing is awkward. I thought it ended maybe 3 times and it just kept going. It's a longer movie and it probably could have been edited down a little bit. It could have been trimmed.
Yeah.
But other than that, it moves along, and it was a fun watch. It's just not something, that I don't think I would need to revisit anytime soon.
Oh, you know who else? You know who else might also, now that I think about it, like would enjoy this movie? Like if you were a real big fan of like exceptional carpentry, like you're a This Old House fan and shit like that, like I would
Sure, yeah.
definitely check this out for the book, the shoot
Yeah,
rack.
it should have been
Absolutely.
nominated for an award, that cabinet.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
As long
This
as
was
you're
the
not
only year
like
they had an Academy Award for Best
a
Carpentry.
cedar, as long as you're not a cedar snob, you're gonna be okay.
Well, and that's the fun fact that nobody knows is there are two featured in that movie. He had one for himself, and that one was made out of cedar. That's what nobody knows.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, it's interesting that this is the movie that Kurt breaks away from Carpenter for. So it was
to be a carpenter.
To be a carpenter. That's his reference. He keeps the reference, but
yeah, I can be my own carpenter. I don't need you.
Yeah, exactly.
I am carpenter.
He could have done They Live instead of Overboard, and I don't know. I always think about when I watch They Live, I'm like, feels like this should have been Kurt instead of Roddy Piper. As much as I love Roddy, but
yeah, I wrestle with that. But Roddy's so good in this, or in They Live, you know.
And his hair really gave a performance too.
Oh, no doubt.
Sure he had a lot. He had big shoes to fill.
That hair was kicking ass and chewing bubble gum.
Yeah.
But yeah, would have been interesting if that was a swap where Roddy Piper in Overboard and Kurt Russell in They Live.
Well, and Kurt didn't come back to Carpenter until Escape from LA, correct?
Yeah.
Like that was
Yep.
And boy, that proved to be a little bit of a fatal move. And that's why he dropped out of Ghost of Mars. So I think that I don't know. Maybe it was time for them to kind of go their own ways. They had a really good run.
Yeah.
And I do think that Kurt maybe was just reading the cards as they laid in front of him.
I think he was with the kind of disastrous run that Big Trouble had and all the fallout from that, and Carpenter walking away from the studios. I think Kurt knew it was that was the end of that era. But so interesting to see Overboard as the movie he kind of pivots to. David, I think it's now time to come back to our 6 degrees of ReconCineMation. You wanted us to connect Overboard to Superman 4, The Quest for Peace.
Yeah, how'd you guys do?
I got there.
I got there as well.
Yeah, I didn't think this would be too hard for you guys. What you guys EK, come on, you're the star. Let's see.
Oh, okay. Mine's pretty basic, so forgive me. This is my first time actually participating. I usually just sit back and hang out and listen, but this one I could actually tackle. So I'm going in 4. I'm going to go Kurt to Tarantino in Death Proof.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And then I'm going to go Tarantino to Michael Madsen in Kill Bill.
Okay.
And then I'm going to go Michael to Gene Hackman in Wild Earp. And then you've got Gene in Superman 4.
Wow.
I love that.
That's great.
Any Wyatt Earp reference is just a big win in my book. So
yeah. Well, it's because I started thinking about Tombstone and all this stuff, and I'm like, Gene definitely was in
one of
Western
them
too. Yeah. And that's when it came to me.
Well done.
That's a great one.
Well, yeah. Brent, what do you got?
I did mine in 6, but that's because I kind of wanted to do a roundabout. Like there are a couple of people that I wanted to kind of. I started it with the approach of using Jared Rushton because he was the only kid in here that I recognized, but I recognized him from a bunch of stuff. So you had mentioned that he was in what before?
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. That's right. But he was also Tom Hanks' little buddy in Big.
That's right.
Which
I'm figure it out.
Yeah, which I'm a huge fan of. He was also in a lesser known movie called Lady in White, which I was a huge fan of as a kid. It's like a ghost story about Lucas Haas as a young kid who gets trapped over like a holiday weekend in a closet at his school, and it's like haunted. And anyway, Rushton's one of the kids that is a bully and locks him in the closet. So he was in Lady in White. One of the other kids that was in that movie that was one of the bullies is a kid named Jason Presson, who's in The Explorers. And that's another one of my favorite movies from being a kid. Ethan Hawke is also in that. Ethan Hawke is in Training Day with Denzel Washington. Denzel Washington is in Crimson Tide with Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman is in Superman 4.
Oh nice. That you chose a difficult route. You did it.
Got to Gene, though.
I
Gene's
wanted
the
to.
link.
I wanted to. Yeah, Gene. Gene had to be in there. Like sometimes like there are just people who you love who you don't see anymore, and you're like, I gotta make sure I include this person as a shout out. So yeah, Gene fits that bill.
All right, I got Kurt to Robert De Niro in Backdraft, De Niro to Diane Keaton in Godfather 2, Diane Keaton to Gene Hackman in Reds.
Nice.
Oh,
so
very good.
There you go.
There you go.
Wow.
I wanted to get it to Shadow Stevens somehow, but it wasn't happening.
It wasn't clicking.
That's a tough one. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, I think that wraps things up with Overboard, and that is our annual look at the next in the Kurt Russell lineage. I think next up is Tequila Sunrise, so that could be an interesting one. Look out, 2025. Here comes Tequila Sunrise. We have a full year to study up on that one, but
thank goodness.
All right, but our next episode, baseball season's right around the corner, and we might meet up with a certain wild thing in the city of Cleveland to celebrate that. So stay tuned for that. Also, we're going to have a mailbag episode coming up. So everybody listening, fire out some questions at us. You can hit us up at ReconCineMation Podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, Facebook. You can drop us a question about any of the movies we covered, anything about the film industry in general. We're rounding those up. So a little bit down the way here, we're going to have a mailbag episode. That's going to be a lot of fun. So we may have some guests for that as well. But
hold on. Sorry, John, just to touch on that real quick. I didn't want to interrupt during the podcast, but this is not a mailbag, but don't forget to leave comments as well. A friend of mine texted me while we were recording, just saying how much he loves the new Ace Ventura or the Ace Ventura episode that we did. So, shout out to Aaron Simity. Thanks for listening, man. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, we'll take any comments you got. You're always welcome to fire them out. We always love hearing the good comments. We just take the bad ones and push them aside. But
yeah, we let the interns deal with those.
EK, what's going on with Laser Graves? Tell us what's the latest on your podcast.
I've just been plugging along like always. We did a little overview of the life of Cyndi Lauper recently. That was pretty fun. That was something that we had kicked around for a couple years and finally got to it because she's quite a character. And, that started with my love for her in the Goonies doing the theme song. So we haven't tackled the Goonies, but we at least got a little bit. We got closer. We'll put it that way. We haven't quite got there yet. It's precious sacred ground. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I'm hesitant to do that one.
Yeah, I have it. It's the same being a musician. I'm like, there's certain bands you don't cover. With podcasting, it's the same way. I'm like, be careful. You're on sacred ground right now. So
yeah.
But we did, deep dive of Cyndi Lauper. That was a lot of fun. But anyway, we're moving along. We just watched The Abyss not too long ago and took a look at that. And
did you catch it in the theaters when it was re-released?
No.
Oh, no. Dude, I went and saw it in the theater.
I bet it was an experience, but
it was.
Yeah. So we've got that coming up here in just a sec too. But
nice,
it's fun, man. We're just moving along. We're having a good time.
Can I plug an episode in particular? I loved the Unsolved Mysteries episode.
Good. Oh, good. That was a surprise. We'd gotten back from Japan and we had planned on having all these pre-recorded episodes to make our life easier. And of course we didn't do any of that. And we were scrambling to do an episode and Mariah took the lead and said, I've got an idea, just sit back and I'll present everything. And she surprised me with her love of unsolved mysteries, and I really, really enjoyed that too. So thanks for that. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I'll let her know.
Yeah, that was a lot of good information there, and a fun episode. And Robert Stack, I mean, you can't beat him. Okay, well, make sure everybody checks out Laser Graves anywhere you get your podcasts. You can check us out anywhere you get your podcasts as well. We're ReconCineMation podcast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, archives at ReconCineMation.com. EK, as always, thank you for our lovely theme song. We appreciate it every single week. Curtis Moore, thank you for the poster. And happy birthday, Kurt Russell. It's coming up. It's right around the corner. We always love talking about Kurt. And happy 73rd.
Happy birthday, Kurt.
Happy birthday, dude. Good job. Keep it up.
All right. We will see you guys on the next ReconCineMation.
Take care.
Cowabunga.
It's all right, baby, it's okay. We're gonna make it, no matter what they say. Show as a star shine in the sky above. There is something special about our love. People change as time goes by. Others come between. But I love you till the day I die. 'Cause there's something special about you and me. Something special about our love.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kurt Russell and Academy Award winner Goldie Hawn.
Before we go any further here, Tom Cruise and Barry Levinson, we got to let you know that your buddy Dustin is going crazy backstage because he didn't have time to thank you, so he thanks you.
Now, honey, I was just thinking back there that we fit in completely to the theme of the show. Because we're co-stars, we're compadres, we're companions, and we're a couple.
Yeah, there's only one thing we're not.
What?
Married.
Honey, is that a proposal?
You're putting me on the spot. I guess now's as good a time as any to answer that. Oh, they want us to speed things up. Listen, we'll talk about it later tonight, okay? The role of a director needs no explanation.
We will talk about that later.
In these film highlights, you'll see why. We'll be back in a minute.